Welcome back to Farm and Hammer, everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to clarify, we are not professional butchers. This is the first time we've butchered pigs before on our property, but this is just how we did it. So if you want to see the process and everything we went through, you can, but I just wanted to let you know this is not the perfect way to do it or how all the professional butchers would do it. This is just what we ended up doing. So first, before we get into the actual butchering, I wanted to show you guys these gloves. Normally I just use the normal blue nitrile gloves, and those seem to rip all the time. The store was out of those, so we ended up coming home with these, and they worked great, never ripped a one of them. So bringing out the whole half a hog here, at this point in the day I'd already done 2 or 3 of these. And as you can tell, once again, this is just for our family, so I am working on clean cardboard. We'd already done 1 or 2 pigs on this sheet of cardboard, but the cardboard was clean. Once again, it's just for our family. We are not selling it to anyone else. So if you want something a whole lot cleaner, you can definitely do so, but we did cardboard to get a lot of pigs to do. Here I'm just taking out some of the internal fat just to get it out of my way. And all of the fat off of these pigs we did save. We put them all in a separate bucket, which you'll see here in a second. And we turned all that into lard. And here I'm just taking off any inedible scraps that are also in the way, getting them into the trash barrel. Now we're going to take off the shoulder, and to do that we're going to go between the 4th and 5th rib. You could see me counting there, and I'm just going to make a slice, and then I will grab a little longer knife just so I can go all the way through the carcass. And it may look like I'm about to impale myself, but I'm not. Then we will pop through this side, and then I'll flip it over and meet my cut on the other end and break that whole side off. But your shoulder, the top portion of the shoulder would be your Boston butt. The lower portion of the shoulder would be where you'd get your picnic roast. And they're pretty tough cuts of meat, and they have a lot of connective tissue in them. So they'd definitely be one of the cuts you'd cook for a long time just to make sure it's pretty tender. Once again, for us, we're turning a lot of this into sausage, and so actually on this specific half we ended up turning this whole shoulder into sausage. And so if you do want to cut those out, it's just a matter of deboning it and splitting the Boston butt from the picnic roast, but we were not doing that on this specific half. Now I'm going to start working on the ham. Once again, we're turning a lot of this into sausage, and so this ham is actually not going to be saved. We'll just be deboning it and putting all the meat into grind. But if you did want a ham, we did save 2 or 3. If you do want a ham, you just do what I'm doing now, and then after it's detached, you'll just debone it. Or I know some people also make ham steaks. You cut some slices out of it and turn it into some steaks if you'd like. But once again, for us, we are just going to debone this. Cut the meat into smaller chunks and then grind it and turn it into breakfast sausage or anything else we decide to make. And here I'm just cutting and trying to get that ball joint free. Once again, you shouldn't need a saw for any of the stuff we're doing today. If you want a saw, it would make it easier, but we won't be using a saw. And now I'm getting started on the tenderloin. As the name suggests, it is one of the most tender pieces of meat on the pig. And that being said, you can take the majority of it out with just your hands, but you do have to be super careful and make sure you don't leave half of the tenderloin on the carcass, because once you start peeling it, it is so tender. You got to be careful, make sure you don't leave it, because part of it will just peel apart and stick to the ribs or something. So once again, one of the most tender cuts of meat, so it is one of the best, just like on a beef or lamb, but just got to make sure it all stays in one piece, which can be difficult sometimes. And just peeling the rest of it out here once again, just doing the majority of the work by hand. And there you have your pork tenderloin. And we're going to rip off anything that's not edible off of this. And then, as you can see here, I'll pull this off and it will take some meat with it. And when that happens, once again, we're trying to waste the least amount of possible from these pigs, and so I'll just scrape that meat off of that tissue there, and then that meat will turn into more sausage. Just taking out some more things that aren't edible just to get them out of my way. And here, as you can see, these pigs are pretty fatty. They had a good 2 or 3 inches of fat, of back fat at least. Here I'm just scraping off, trying to take off some of the dirt that we managed to get on the outside of the pig, and the other pigs we actually kept relatively clean. This one, for some reason, of course the one I decided to video, we did get some dirt on the outside, so I'm just scraping off some of that fat, taking some of the dirt with it, just to make sure we don't put a bunch of dirt in our lard. Also, any of the fat with a little blood on it, I took that off as well. Once again, just to make sure the lard has the least amount of pork flavor as possible. And this chunk of fat I'm taking off, it will be saved, and I'm taking this off so I can get access to the pork chops and the loin there. I'm just inserting my knife there right next to the spine, and we'll follow that spine as close as we can all the way to the rear of the pig. As you guys probably know, pigs are relatively long animal. They've been selectively bred to get longer and longer over the years. They are relatively long, so you will have a long piece of loin here. Once again, I'm not a professional. I know professional butchers would probably do this differently. But these pigs, they were so fat, and the fat was at 34 degrees and 33 degrees in the cooler. So the fat was really hard and difficult to cut through. On beef or deer, the loin comes out super easy, comes out super quick. You can almost, once again, peel it out like you would the tenderloin. You could do most of it with your hands, but once again, since this pork was so fatty, it was difficult to navigate, difficult to cut around and cut through. So this is how I ended up doing it. Right here you can see me cutting off the sirloin portion of the loin. This would be your pork sirloin steaks, if you'd like. I'm trying to cut around the tail there. And there's the pork sirloin. And we'll probably take off some of that fat, because personally we don't like that much fat on our pork, but so here I'm going from the spine to the ribs, just following that down and trying to remove this loin here. We ended up turning all of the loins into pork chops. We also made some butterfly chops. And now we're going to start working on the bacon. So the part I'm cutting off here, all of that will turn into sausage. And honestly, I may have done some of this pork belly incorrectly. If you were going to say baby back ribs or even spare ribs, you would leave more of this meat on the ribs. But since we weren't saving any of those on this particular half, I basically left them all on the bacon. As you can see, I'm cutting off some of it there. But for the most part, I left all of the whole pork belly all in one piece, and then we ended up cutting it in half so it would fit in the slicer for bacon. But now it's time to try to get the rest of the pork belly, or in this case, get the bacon off of the carcass. So to do so, once again, we'll just follow straight down the ribs, try to keep as close to the ribs as you can. In this video, you can see the ribs all the way down, which is what you want. You want to leave no meat attached to the ribs if possible. And eventually your bacon should come free. Like I said, this is bigger than most people would leave a whole thing of bacon, because they'd cut off at least half of that for your ribs. Since we weren't doing ribs, I thought it couldn't hurt to leave it as a bigger piece and try to get more bacon out of it. And personally, I like a lot of fat on my bacon, but this was even too much, so I'm just taking off some of the fat and trying to get it down into a more manageable size. And even after I took off some of this fat, there's still plenty left over for the bacon. So these Idaho pasture pigs had a lot of fat on them, and they didn't have as much meat as a traditional hog would, so fat isn't always a bad thing. As I said, we turned all this into lard, and the lard turned out great, so can't really complain about all the fat. And now, like I said, we're just going to square this up so it can fit in the slicer. We won't have some weird, small, jagged cuts of bacon. Once again, this piece is still too big, so we're going to take off a little bit of the top and then a little more off the bottom. And there is the final piece of bacon, or pork belly, whatever you want to call it. We did end up curing and slicing the pork belly, but I'll get into that later. Okay. And so next, we took all of the grind, all the little chunks after we had processed everything down further. Trying to get mixed meat and fat. We put all of that into this stuffing bin, because we know this bin holds 26 pounds of meat. And all of the seasoning we purchased, which we did purchase from Walton's. This isn't sponsored, but we did buy all of our meat seasonings from Walton's. The seasoning bags are supposed to do 25 pounds of meat, so we knew if we filled that up, we'd have roughly 20 to 26 pounds of meat. Since we didn't have a scale, that's how we ended up measuring how much meat we had. Now we're putting it all back into this bin and trying to spread it out as much as we can, just so we can get it seasoned evenly. Once again, this seasoning is from Walton's. This particular batch, this is actually the first batch we ended up doing. This batch was actually Italian sausage, and we only did 25 pounds of it. Looking back, we probably should have done more. Yeah, just sprinkling it on top, we'll mix it in and then spread the rest of it and mix it up again. I know some people do season it after they have ground the meat, but we weren't really sure how that would turn out since we don't have a meat mixer, and so we just decided to season it before we grind it and hope the grinding process and the stuffing process would mix the seasoning in enough. And next we'll put it into the grinder, and sorry my audio on my microphone went out at this point, so there isn't any audio, but if you haven't seen the video of all my processing equipment, I do have a video explaining kind of all the specs on all this stuff, but if you want to check that out, it is on my channel somewhere. And with this grinder, it is a Cabela's grinder, and it does, I think, about 23 pounds per minute. Obviously, as you can see, we weren't running it that hard, but it is, you can do up to 20-some pounds of meat per minute. We have done that with beef, but with pork, since it's so fatty, we weren't trying to push it too hard, especially without the cooler on the end. So that's about the speed we kept it running, which is still pretty quick, and we went through quite a bit of pork in a relatively short amount of time. So grinder worked great, and hopefully all the meat was seasoned and mixed well. Now we're going to take the stuff we just ground up and we're going to put it into the sausage stuffer. Just filling that up, and once again, you can do this with one person, but it's much easier to have two. So in this video we have one person working on the bags. We labeled each bag. These are pork. They do say ground pork on them, but since we had different kinds of sausage, different kinds of breakfast sausage, and different kinds of Italian sausage, we labeled each bag so we know exactly what is in each bag. And then this was the first time either of us had used an actual sausage stuffer, so these first couple bags we did super slow. By the end of the night we were filling up a bag and having it taped in probably 7 or 8 seconds. So as you can tell, this first one we're going slow. We don't really know what we're doing, because before this we were just using the stuffer on the meat grinder, and that was super slow, so that's why I ended up buying this commercial stuffer here. And once again, by the end of the night we were filling up these bags super quick, and it was a big time saver compared to the stuffer that's built in on the grinder. And then we'll just stick it through the tape machine there, and that tapes the top, and it's ready to go in the freezer. Here's a little bit more of a close-up. Once again, we're still going slow at this point, and the bags weren't filled perfectly yet, but by the end of the night I think we got the hang of it. The bags are coming out looking better than what you could get in a store, and they looked pretty professional. So we did fill up some 1-pound bags, and we also filled up some 2-pound bags, and we did buy these from Walton's. Not a sponsored video, but we got most of our meat processing stuff from them. And the tape machine, it works super well, and it is a big time saver. Like I said, it was relatively cheap, so if you're doing your own processing, I would definitely recommend getting a tape machine, because it saved a lot of time. And here we ended up finishing up the bin, so we were just cleaning out the rest of the Italian sausage so we could make some more breakfast sausage. And of course the bacon, the pork belly, we did cure it, and This is during the smoking process. We had just gotten it started, and we put in the big green egg, had it smoking at 175 degrees for 5 to 7 hours. And then after that was done, we ended up slicing it. And this slicer here is actually from the 1930s. It may look dirty, but it was well sanitized and cleaned. That's just, once again, it's a 1930s, so it's not going to look perfect, but it still works great. I think the only thing that was redone on it was the power cord, but everything else is original, and it still works like a charm. So those first cuts of bacon, we did take those off. Those ended up being scraps. They had a lot of salt on them, so but all the rest here, the bacon turned out great. As you can see, it looks like store-bought bacon here. And after frying some up, I will say it's probably the best homegrown bacon we've had. We've purchased some half hogs in the past and had a company, process them and everything, and the bacon just never turned out tasting like store-bought. But I will say, after cooking some, ours tasted the closest to store-bought that I've had. So I'm really impressed with the bacon. It was sort of a tedious process, but I'm really happy with the results. And for the cure, most of the bacon we just used salt, brown sugar, and pepper. We did substitute some of the brown sugar with maple syrup, but honestly we really couldn't tell that much difference between the two. All of them turned out great. They all tasted great and tasted like bacon, so pretty happy with the results there. And last but not least, we have the lard. I didn't show any of the lard making process because once again it was our first time, so I didn't want to act like we knew what we were doing, but the lard did actually turn out great. Came out a really perfect white, came out really clear, and my mom has made some things with the lard since, and it all tasted great. So we did separate out the leaf lard, and we made that separately, so we do have leaf lard and then just normal lard. But both of them honestly had little to no pork flavor at all, which is good. If you want something, a natural form of Crisco or something like that, this was a good alternative. So it turned out great. We have a ton of it, probably more than we're gonna eat. In total, if you guys want to know how much meat we got off of these 4 pigs, we had roughly 380 pounds of sausage, 80 to 85 pounds of bacon. We had 3 hams, not sure about the weight on those. And then of course we had a lot of pork chops and butterfly chops. Once again, I didn't weigh all of those. We did save some jowl. We're not really sure if that's going to turn out or taste very good, but we did save it. So all in all, we got a ton of meat off of these pigs. Pretty happy with how they grew out. Even though it did take a little longer, we still got a pretty good amount of meat off of them. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, I would encourage you to do so. And for everyone else, if you could give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, I would really appreciate it.